There's a very specific kind of stupidity that only exists when other people are watching. Normal stupidity happens in private. You touch the wrong wire, you stand in the wrong place, you think, this should be fine, and then immediately learn why it wasn't. But performative stupidity is different. Performative stupidity needs witnesses. It needs cheers. It needs phones pointed at it. It needs one drunk friend saying, "Bro, do it." It needs an audience because the whole point isn't just to survive the bad idea. The point is to look legendary for 5 glorious seconds. And the 10 people in today's video all chased exactly that moment. They wanted the laugh, the clip, the applause, the story people would tell forever. And to be fair, people absolutely did tell the story forever, just not in the way they planned. So think of this video as an autopsy of show-off culture. 10 moments where human beings looked at common sense, looked at a crowd, and chose the crowd. Because apparently, nothing makes a bad idea stronger than hearing somebody in the background yell, "Let's go!" Let's begin with a gamer who wanted a more immersive experience and accidentally discovered that Gravity has the best graphics engine on Earth. Case 1. The VR hero who took the quest too seriously. Virtual reality is built on a very simple lie. It tells your brain, this is real enough. Real enough to make you duck when an arrow flies at your face. Real enough to make you flinch when a dragon roars in your ear. Real enough to convince you that a blank wall in your apartment is actually the edge of a cursed mountain fortress in the kingdom of Ethgard. For Leo, that lie had become a lifestyle. Leo was not just a gamer. Leo was a full-time resident of fictional worlds who occasionally visited his apartment to recharge his headset and ignore his landlord's emails. His tiny 10th-floor apartment was less a home and more a biological support pod for the far more important business of becoming a legend in Ethgard's Reckoning, a sprawling fantasy VR game where players fought monsters, collected artifacts, and sacrificed sleep hygiene in pursuit of server rank. And Leo was close, very close. He was on the final quest, the boss fight, the leaderboard run, the kind of moment that turns a man from some guy in sweatpants into that absolute beast from the Discord server. There was just one problem. His apartment was too small. Every dramatic swing of his enchanted warhammer risked smashing a lamp, punching drywall, or committing involuntary manslaughter against a houseplant. To a normal person, the solution would be, move the furniture. To Leo, the solution was, move reality. He decided to take the headset outside, specifically onto his 10th floor balcony. In his mind, this was genius. Unlimited space, fresh air, no coffee table, and best of all, a little real wind on his face to make the fantasy feel even more immersive. His guildmates on Discord loved it. They howled, they cheered. One of them actually said, "Bro, this is content," which, historically speaking, is one of the most dangerous sentences in the English language. So Leo stepped onto the balcony, put on the headset, gripped the controllers, and instantly stopped being a guy standing over a parking lot. In his mind, he was now on the edge of Dragon's Tooth Precipice, a massive cliff in the game, jagged rocks, storm clouds, a bottomless chasm waiting below. And to complete the quest, his character had to perform a leap of faith off the cliff to reach a hidden objective. Now let's pause for one important reality check. Leo was standing on a very real 10th floor balcony with a very real aluminum railing and a very real 100-foot drop. The game was fake, the building was not. But Leo was fully committed. A gust of wind swept around the corner of the building and hit his face. Inside the headset, that wind became proof. "Guys," he shouted into the microphone, practically vibrating with excitement. "This is insane. It feels so real." That sentence should have ended the session immediately. Instead, it became his final review. He crouched slightly, placed his hands on what his brain believed was the craggy edge of a fantasy cliff, what was, in fact, the top bar of the balcony railing. Then he jumped. For half a second, Leo was exactly who he always wanted to be. A hero, a legend, a warrior soaring through a digital sky while his friends screamed in his headphones. Then the simulation ended, violently. His guildmates heard a short, confused yell, then a fading scream, then a sound so final that the entire Discord call reportedly went silent. On Leo's screen, his avatar stood motionless at the edge of the virtual cliff. In reality, Leo had just discovered the one experience more immersive than VR: terminal velocity. Case 2. The man who built a perfect room and forgot oxygen. Perfection is a dangerous hobby, not because it's hard, but because once you get close enough to it, you start believing you're smarter than the basic rules that kept humans alive for the last few 100,000 years. Trent was that kind of person, an amateur sound engineer with professional-level ego and a basement that he treated like a sacred temple of acoustics. To Trent, sound wasn't just something you heard, it was something you controlled, refined, isolated, perfected. And his masterpiece? A fully soundproof recording studio built in his basement. Not put some foam on the walls soundproof. We're talking thick acoustic panels, floating walls, sealed seams, custom ventilation minimized to basically decorative, and a door so heavy it closed with the kind of deep metallic thunk that made you feel like you just sealed a Cold War bunker. Trent loved that door. That door was his personality. During one band practice, while Trent was giving his usual lecture about sonic purity, the drummer made a small, completely reasonable observation. "Hey man, it's kind of stuffy in here." Now, in a normal universe, that's feedback. In Trent's universe, that's war. He immediately straightened up like a professor whose student just questioned gravity. "Stuffy," he scoffed. "It's airtight. That's the point. You can't get clean sound with air leaks." And right there, the entire room should have collectively decided to leave. But they didn't, because someone asked the worst possible follow-up question. How airtight is it? Now Trent had an audience, and once a perfectionist has an audience, logic is no longer the priority. Reputation is. He smirked, crossed his arms, and delivered the line that would later double as his eulogy. "This room is so sealed, I could stay in here for an hour. Easy." Silence. Then someone said, "Bet." And just like that, it stopped being a discussion and became a challenge. Trent, fueled by pride and a complete misunderstanding of how breathing works, accepted immediately. "Lock me in," he said. "Time it." His bandmates, who had just been gifted an hour of silence from Trent's lectures, did not hesitate. They stepped outside, pulled the door shut, and threw the heavy deadbolts. Thunk. Inside the room, Trent sat down, calm and confident. For the first few minutes, he was right. It was perfect. No noise, no vibration, no distraction. Just pure, absolute silence. The kind of silence that makes audiophiles emotional. The kind of silence that also, coincidentally, exists in places where humans do not survive. About 10 minutes in, something changed. The air felt thicker. Not dramatic, just slightly off. Breathing required a bit more effort. His chest felt a little tight. Still manageable, still ignorable. Because admitting discomfort would mean admitting he might be wrong. And Trent didn't do wrong. 20 minutes. Now the headache started. A dull, creeping pressure behind the eyes. His breaths became deeper, slower, more deliberate. Because here's the part Trent skipped while designing his masterpiece. Air is not optional. Oxygen is not a suggestion. And a sealed room doesn't just keep sound out, it keeps air from coming in. Every breath he took was quietly converting oxygen into carbon dioxide. And unlike his ego, oxygen does, in fact, run out. 30 minutes. His thoughts started to blur. Focus slipped. The silence, once peaceful, now felt heavy, oppressive, like the room itself was pressing in on him. His body began doing what bodies do when they realize the brain is making terrible decisions. It panicked. His breathing sped up, which made everything worse. More oxygen burned, more carbon dioxide built up. His heart rate climbed, his hands shook. And now the realization hit, not intellectually, not calmly, but all at once. He stood up too fast, stumbled toward the door, and started pounding, hard. But the same soundproofing he had spent years perfecting was now doing its job flawlessly. His fists made noise, just not noise that could escape. He shouted, screamed, begged. But outside? Nothing. Just a group of bandmates enjoying the quietest hour of their lives. Inside, Trent's perfect studio had become exactly what he designed it to be. A completely isolated environment. No sound in, no sound out. No air exchange. Just a finite supply of oxygen being steadily consumed by the one man who insisted it was enough. By the time the hour was up, the laughter outside had faded into casual conversation. Someone checked the time. All right, let's go see if he's still alive. The door unlocked. The bolt slid back. The heavy slab opened with that same satisfying bunker-like thunk. And inside, the room was still perfect. Perfectly silent, perfectly sealed, perfectly empty of breathable air. Trent was on the floor, motionless, surrounded by the most acoustically flawless environment he had ever created. He had achieved perfection, just not the kind you walk away from. Because it turns out, you can engineer the perfect room for sound, but if you forget about oxygen, you've just built a very expensive coffin. Case 3. The man who tried to prove a tire was indestructible. There's a certain type of confidence you only find in a mechanic shop. It's loud, it's stubborn, and it's usually built on years of experience mixed with just enough overconfidence to turn a bad idea into a live demonstration. Gus was a legend in that environment. Mid-50s, grease permanently embedded in his skin, voice like gravel being chewed. He didn't just fix machines, he understood them. Or at least, that's what he believed. His latest obsession was a massive industrial truck tire called the Rhinocore Extreme 5000. To a normal person, it was just a tire. To Gus, it was a masterpiece. "Look at that tread," he'd say, slapping it like it owed him money. "That's not rubber, that's engineering." The younger mechanics weren't impressed. They saw the price tag. They saw marketing. And one of them made the fatal mistake of saying it out loud. "Man, it's just a tire." That sentence hit Gus harder than any wrench ever could. Because now, it wasn't about the tire anymore. It was about respect. And unfortunately, there was an audience. The shop went quiet. People turned. Someone pulled out a phone. And Gus, now operating purely on pride and testosterone, decided this was his moment. "You think this is just marketing?" he barked. "This thing is military grade. You couldn't pop this if you tried." Now, there are two types of statements in life. 1, statements you can walk away from. 2, statements that demand proof. Gus had just chosen option 2. He dragged the massive tire across the shop floor toward the industrial air compressor. This wasn't a small machine. This was the kind of compressor that sounds like it could inflate a blimp or start a war. He jammed the air chuck onto the valve, turned to his audience, and smiled. "Watch this." That's always how it starts. The compressor roared to life. The tire, already inflated to its safe operating pressure of around 120 psi, began to swell. Slowly at first, then noticeably. The gauge climbed. There was a red zone on the gauge, a very clear, very obvious red zone. Gus treated it like a suggestion. "Still good," he shouted over the noise. The younger mechanic stopped laughing, because now the tire didn't look normal anymore. It looked wrong, distended, stretched, like something that had been pushed way past the point it was ever designed to handle. The gauge kept climbing. At this point, the tire wasn't just inflated. It was a pressurized weapon, a rubber-coated pressure vessel storing an insane amount of energy, just waiting for a structural failure, which, scientifically speaking, was no longer a possibility. It was a countdown. But Gus was locked in, because once you start performing in front of a crowd, stopping is not an option. Stopping means you were wrong, and being wrong, to Gus, was worse than danger. "See?" he yelled. "Told you, this thing's a beast!" The tire creaked. Actually creaked. Rubber isn't supposed to make that sound. That's the sound of material begging for mercy. The gauge hit somewhere around 250 psi, which is not a little too much. That is pipe bomb territory, and Gus was standing right next to it, hands still on the hose, proud, smiling, completely unaware that he had just turned a tire into an explosive device with a rubber disguise. Then it happened. Not a pop, not a hiss, An explosion. A violent, concussive blast that ripped through the shop like a shockwave. The tire didn't fail. It detonated. The sidewall tore apart instantly, releasing all that stored pressure in one catastrophic burst. Tools flew. Lights flickered. The air itself seemed to punch everyone in the chest at the same time. And at ground zero was Gus. There is no reaction time for something like that. No jump out of the way. No second chance. Just physics cashing a check he wrote 5 seconds earlier. When the dust settled, the shop was silent. Phones still recording. People frozen. The tire, or what was left of it, lay shredded across the floor. Gus had spent years trusting machines, understanding them, respecting them, and in one moment of needing to prove a point in front of an audience, he forgot the most important rule he had ever learned. There is no such thing as indestructible. There is only, hasn't exploded yet. Case 4. The influencer who tried to outlast the cold. The internet has created a very interesting illusion that if enough people are watching you, you become harder to kill. More likes equals more power. More viewers equals more control. More comments equals more proof that what you're doing must be working. Unfortunately, human biology does not subscribe to your channel. Chad, known online as Iceman Chad, had built his entire identity around one simple philosophy: mind over matter. Cold? Ignore it. Pain? Override it. Limits? For weaker people. His content was a steady stream of escalating challenges designed to prove that the human body was basically optional if your mindset was strong enough. Ice baths, cold showers, winter shirtless runs, and of course, a loyal fan base cheering him on. Because nothing fuels bad decisions quite like thousands of people typing, "Let's go King!" So Chad decided it was time to level up. Not just another ice bath, a record-breaking ice bath. Live, in front of everyone. He set it up in his backyard, a large steel tub, filled to the brim with freezing water and hundreds of pounds of ice. A floating grave disguised as content. The camera was rolling. The chat was flying. The energy was exactly what he wanted. He stood there in nothing but bright athletic shorts, chest puffed out, teeth already chattering slightly, but ego doing most of the talking. "Today," he said into the camera, "we're pushing past limits." That sentence should have ended the stream. Instead, it became the theme. He stepped in, and immediately, shock. Real, violent, full-body shock. His muscles tensed. His breath snapped. His skin flushed red. Cold water immersion isn't discomfort. It's an electrical event. The body reacts like it's under attack. But Chad smiled, because pain, to him, was content. "See," he said, forcing a grin. "It's all in your head." The chat exploded. Fire emojis. Applause. People calling him insane, in a good way. For the first few minutes, he looked like he was winning. Controlled breathing, focused expression, that classic influencer calm. But here's the problem. The human body does not care about branding. It cares about survival. And right now, his body had already started a silent countdown. First came the shivering. Not light trembling, violent, uncontrollable shaking. That wasn't weakness. That was his body desperately trying to generate heat by burning energy as fast as possible. To his audience, it looked intense. To a doctor, it looked like the beginning of a medical emergency. Chad saw it as something to defeat. He tensed his muscles, tried to suppress the shaking, tried to stay in control, which is the exact opposite of what his body needed. Because now he was burning even more energy, even faster. 10 minutes in, his speech started slipping, words slightly slurred, thoughts a bit slower. But he kept talking because silence kills engagement, and engagement was the whole point. "Still good," he muttered. "Mind over matter." The chat believed him because the camera doesn't show internal failure. It only shows performance. Then something happened that looked like victory. The shivering stopped. His body went still. His face relaxed. A faint smile. To Chad, This meant he had conquered the cold. To reality, this meant his body had run out of options. Because when shivering stops in extreme cold, it's not because you adapted, it's because your system is shutting down. His core temperature was dropping fast. His heart rhythm became unstable. His brain, deprived of warmth and oxygen, began to fade. But the stream was still live, the audience still watching, still waiting for the win. Chad blinked slowly, looked at the camera, and gave one last weak smile, as if to say, "See? Told you." Then his eyes rolled slightly. His body slumped sideways, and he slipped under the icy water. No dramatic music, no warning, just the quiet, clinical end of a system that had reached its limit. The chat didn't react immediately, because at first, it looked like part of the challenge. But this wasn't a challenge anymore. This was a shutdown. A complete system failure triggered by the one thing Chad thought he could override: basic human physiology. Because while the cold might feel like just a sensation, cardiac arrest is not. And it turns out, you can ignore discomfort. You can fight pain. You can even convince thousands of people that you're in control. But you cannot negotiate with thermodynamics. Case 5. The backyard astronaut who aimed for the lake and found a tree. There are two types of engineers in this world: the ones who calculate and the ones who say, that looks about right. Kevin belonged to the second group, and like many great disasters in human history, this one began with cheap beer, a free weekend, and a terrible idea that sounded incredible at the time. The idea? Build a full-scale human slingshot. Not a metaphor, an actual slingshot, big enough to launch a grown man across a field and into a lake. Because apparently, somewhere between cartoon physics and real life, Kevin got confused about which one applied to him. The materials were ambitious. 2 heavy telephone poles buried into the ground, industrial-grade surgical tubing stretched between them, a forklift to pull the tension, and at the center of it all, Kevin, the payload, the volunteer, the future lesson. He would be seated inside an inflatable kiddie pool shaped like a smiling frog, because nothing says safe aerospace experiment like a plastic frog. Their target? A lake roughly 300 yards away. Their calculation method? One guy squinting at the horizon and saying, "Yeah, that should clear it." No equations, no measurements, just confidence. And confidence, historically, has never failed anyone. As the sun dipped lower, the build was complete. The contraption stood there like a monument to bad decisions. Tension cables stretched, rubber tubing creaking, energy building. A weapon disguised as a weekend project. Kevin climbed into the frog pool, wearing a motorcycle helmet, which is the universal symbol for, "I understand this is dangerous, but not enough to stop." His friend held up a phone, recording, because if something incredible was about to happen, it needed to be documented. "Any last words?" someone asked. Kevin looked straight into the camera, grinning, living his best life, and delivered a line that, in hindsight, should have triggered immediate evacuation. "Tell NASA I'm coming for them." That was it. That was the moment the universe locked in its response. The forklift reversed, slowly at first, then harder, stretching the surgical tubing further and further back. The rubber screamed under tension. The poles groaned. The entire structure vibrated with stored kinetic energy. And Kevin? Still smiling, still confident, still absolutely certain this was going to work. Because from his perspective, everything looked perfect. The angle looked right. The distance looked manageable. The lake was right there, just a simple arc through the air. Except, they only calculated distance. They didn't calculate height, or trajectory, or obstacles. Specifically, the large, very solid oak tree standing directly between the launch point and the water. But no one noticed, because no one was looking for problems. They were looking for a moment. "Let it go!" The release mechanism snapped, and with a thundercrack of tension releasing all at once, Kevin was launched. For one brief, beautiful second, it worked. He soared, high, fast, a perfect arc against the evening sky. The frog-shaped vessel spinning slightly as he cut through the air like a budget astronaut. Below him, his friends screamed, not in fear, in excitement, because for that 1 second, it looked like success. But then he reached the peak, that quiet moment where everything slows down, where gravity takes over, where reality checks your math. And from that perfect vantage point, Kevin saw it, the tree, closer than expected, much closer, and completely unavoidable. There is no steering in a human slingshot, no brakes, no second attempt, just momentum and regret. The impact was immediate, violent, unforgiving. He didn't splash into the lake. He slammed into the thick trunk of the oak tree with the force of a small car crash. The frog pool folded. The energy stopped. And just like that, NASA lost a candidate. The camera kept rolling, because of course it did. The perfect shot, the full arc, the launch, the flight, the impact. Everything Kevin wanted, just not the ending he imagined. Because the difference between cartoons and reality is simple. In cartoons, you hit the tree and bounce. In real life, the tree wins. Every time. Case 6. The man who tried to lick a myth. Nature has a very simple way of communicating danger. Bright colors, spikes, unusual shapes. It's basically the planet saying, hey, don't touch this. Most people understand that. Greg did not. Greg was on vacation, tropical beach, warm water, family nearby. The kind of setting where the most dangerous thing should be overpriced drinks. Instead, they found a pufferfish. It had washed into a shallow tide pool, bloated, spiky, floating there like a biological warning sign with attitude. Greg's family reacted like normal humans. They stood back, observed, respected the very obvious message the animal was sending. Greg stepped forward. Because Greg didn't just see an animal, he saw an opportunity. An opportunity to be right. An opportunity to educate. An opportunity to become, for a brief moment, the smartest person on the beach. Relax, he said, waving off concern. These things are only dangerous if you eat them. Now, that statement is technically half true. Which is the most dangerous kind of knowledge? Because Greg didn't learn it from biology. He learned it from somewhere vague. A documentary he half-watched. A fact he misremembered. Confidence filling in all the gaps. They serve this in Japan, he continued, now fully committed. Only toxic if it's prepared wrong. The fish puffed up more. A direct, biological escalation of, please stop. Greg interpreted this as drama. He poked it with a stick. The fish inflated even further. Spikes more pronounced. Body tense. Nature increasing the font size of the warning label. Greg smiled, because now he had an audience. His family watching. Possibly other beachgoers noticing. And once there's an audience, backing down is no longer an option. I'm telling you, he said louder now. It's just a myth. There it is. The sentence that has ended more human lives than almost anything else. It's just a myth. He turned, looked at his family, saw doubt, and decided to destroy it completely. Watch this. 3 words. The unofficial slogan of Darwin Awards. Before anyone could react, Greg reached down, picked up the fish, held it in his hand like a prop in a demonstration he was absolutely not qualified to give. And then, because confidence without knowledge always escalates, he took it one step further. I'm so sure, he said, I'll even lick it. There was a moment, a brief, suspended second where reality gave him a chance. Time to reconsider. Time to stop. Time to remain alive. Greg ignored all of it and licked the fish. Not a quick touch, a full, deliberate swipe. Like he was sampling something. Like this was a controlled experiment. It was, just not the kind he thought. Because here's what Greg didn't know. The pufferfish produces tetrodotoxin, one of the most potent neurotoxins on Earth. And it's not just inside the fish. It can be secreted through the skin, meaning Greg didn't just prove a point. He administered poison directly into his own system. The effect was immediate. First, numbness. Lips, tongue, a strange tingling sensation. Greg laughed. Of course he did. Because when something feels unfamiliar, the human instinct is often to pretend it's fine. See, he said, voice slightly off. Told you. But the numbness spread, fast. From his mouth, to his face, down into his body. His smile faded, replaced by confusion, then fear. Because now his muscles weren't responding the same way. His breathing felt wrong, shallow, restricted. What tetrodotoxin does is brutally efficient. It shuts down nerve signals. Not painfully, not dramatically, just quietly, methodically, until your body forgets how to function. Greg tried to speak. Words didn't come out right. He tried to move. His coordination failed. And then, he couldn't breathe. Not because his lungs stopped existing, but because the signal telling them to move was gone. He collapsed onto the sand, fully conscious, fully aware, but completely locked inside a body that had just been switched off. Around him, panic. People shouting, running, trying to understand what just happened. But Greg had already answered that question. He had just proven, beyond any doubt, that the myth was real. Painfully real. Irreversibly real. Because when nature puts spikes on something, inflates it like a warning balloon, and clearly signals do not interact, it's not being mysterious, it's being generous. And if your response to that generosity is, I'm gonna lick it, then congratulations. You didn't debunk the myth, you just became part of it. Case 7. The man who tried to tank a fire hose. Community events are designed to educate. Fire department open houses, for example, exist so families can learn how dangerous fire really is, without actually being on fire. You get big trucks, friendly firefighters, kids wearing plastic helmets, and controlled demonstrations of equipment that, under normal circumstances, can knock down walls. For most people, this is informative. For Barry, this was an opportunity. Barry was the kind of man whose confidence increased in direct proportion to the number of people watching him. Not because he was skilled, but because he believed, deep in his soul, that attention and strength were the same thing. And on that day, he had both. A small crowd had gathered around a firefighter demonstrating a deck-mounted water cannon, a massive hose system capable of projecting water with enough force to knock down doors, push back flames, and, under the wrong conditions, launch a human being like a piece of loose furniture. The firefighter explained calmly, "This stream can exceed over 100 pounds per square inch and generate several hundred pounds of force. To a normal person, that translates to, stay away. To Barry, it translated to, that doesn't sound impressive." He stepped forward, chest out, shoulders back. The posture of a man about to make a mistake in front of witnesses. "That's it?" he scoffed. "I could take that. Wouldn't even move." Now, firefighters are trained professionals. They deal with emergencies. They deal with danger. But nothing in their training fully prepares them for a man actively volunteering to be hit by industrial-grade water pressure. They tried to explain, again, calmly, more clearly. This isn't like a garden hose. It can seriously hurt you. Barry smiled, because warnings, to him, were not safety measures. They were challenges. "You're just saying that," he replied. "Turn it on. I'll stand right here." And just like that, he had an audience. Phones out. People watching. Energy building. The exact environment where bad decisions evolve into commitments. The firefighters refused at first, because legally and morally, this was a terrible idea. But Barry kept pushing, mocking, questioning their confidence, suggesting they were scared. Eventually, worn down and trying to control the situation, the fire captain agreed to a compromise. A low-pressure demonstration. Safe, controlled, manageable. Barry stepped into position, feet planted on wet asphalt, arms slightly out, a grin on his face like a man about to win something. He turned to the crowd, flexed, and delivered his final line. "Go on, hit me." I won't even move." That sentence lasted longer than his balance. The firefighter aimed, adjusted the nozzle, and released the stream. Now, let's clarify something. Low pressure in firefighting terms does not mean low impact. It means less likely to break something immediately. The water hit Barry square in the chest. For a split second, he didn't move. And in that split second, his face changed. Because that was the exact moment reality made contact. The force wasn't impressive. It was overwhelming. A solid, continuous column of mass moving at high velocity doesn't push you. It relocates you. Barry didn't step back. He didn't brace. He didn't resist. He was lifted, clean off his feet, launched backward like a failed experiment. His body traveled roughly 10 feet in less than a second, and then, impact. The back of his head met the steel bumper of the fire truck behind him. No bounce, no recovery, just a hard, final stop. The kind that ends demonstrations. The crowd went silent, phone still up, recording. Because the moment they came to see had happened, just not the way they expected. Barry had wanted to prove he wouldn't move, and technically, for a fraction of a second, he was right. But then physics took over, and physics doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care how strong you think you are. It doesn't care how many people are watching. It doesn't care about your confidence. It only cares about force, mass, and impact. And in that equation, Barry was not the stronger variable. He came to demonstrate toughness and ended up demonstrating something far more educational: the difference between a human body and a machine designed to fight disasters. Spoiler, the machine wins, every time. Case 8. The man who built total control and forgot about lag. Smart homes promise one thing above all: control. Lights on command, doors at a tap, systems that obey instantly, flawlessly, perfectly. At least, that's the fantasy. Derek didn't just buy into that fantasy. He upgraded it. Because to Derek, using existing technology wasn't enough. He needed to improve it, rebuild it, strip it down, make it smarter, faster, better. Which is how he ended up rewriting the control system for his garage door. Now, garage doors are boring for a reason. They come with auto reverse sensors, pressure stops, safety cutoffs, features designed specifically to prevent the exact thing Derek was about to demonstrate. Derek removed all of them, because in his words, they're unnecessary, which is tech language for, I understand this system better than the people who designed it. He replaced everything with a custom-built smartphone app. One tap to open, one tap to close. Instant response. No delays, no interference, no safety net. Just pure direct control. To Derek, this wasn't dangerous. It was elegant. He invited his neighbor Dave over to show it off. Dave was the kind of person who asks the right questions, which is why he immediately asked, "Are you sure that's safe?" Derek laughed, not politely, not casually, but with the full confidence of someone who had already decided the answer. "Safe? It's perfectly safe," he said, holding up his phone. "I have total control." That sentence should be illegal, because every time someone says it, they are seconds away from proving they don't. Dave looked at the garage door. Heavy, metal, several hundred pounds of downward-moving reality. "You trust that app that much?" he asked. Derek didn't hesitate. "Watch this." Of course, the three most dangerous words. He walked into the garage, lay down on the concrete floor, directly under the door, centered, perfect alignment. Because if you're going to demonstrate confidence, you might as well go all in. Dave froze, because at this point, the situation had gone from bad idea to actively unfolding incident. "Dude, maybe don't..." But Derek was already in performance mode, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the screen. "This is precision," he said. "I'll close it right down to my chest and stop it exactly where I want." The door began to move, slow, smooth, controlled. At first, it looked impressive. The door descended, shadow creeping down Derek's body, from feet to legs to torso. "See?" he said calmly. "Perfect control." And for a moment, he was right, because nothing had gone wrong yet, which is the exact moment things usually do. The door reached mid-torso, still descending, still steady. Derek watched it closely, waiting, timing, preparing to tap the stop button at just the right moment. This was the climax, the proof, the point where confidence becomes validation. He tapped the screen. Nothing happened. A brief pause, less than a second. But in a system like this, a second is everything. His phone lagged just enough. Background processes, notifications, a tiny delay in response time. The app didn't freeze, it just hesitated. And that hesitation was all physics needed. Because while software can lag, momentum cannot. The door kept moving, uninterrupted, unaware, unimpressed. Derek tapped again, harder, frantically. The command finally registered. Too late. The system tried to stop, but the door, already in motion, already committed, completed its path, and met resistance, his chest. The impact wasn't explosive. It didn't need to be. Just heavy, sudden, final. Several hundred pounds pressing down with full mechanical certainty. Dave moved instantly, shouting, trying to lift the door. But the system Derek had designed didn't prioritize interruption. It prioritized command. And the command had already been executed, moments earlier, when Derek pressed close. The same system that gave him total control had no idea it was doing anything wrong. Because from its perspective, everything worked perfectly. Input received, action completed, end of process. Derek had built a system with no safety checks, no overrides, no margin for error, because in his mind, he was the margin. He had removed every safeguard designed to protect him, in order to prove that he didn't need protection. And in doing so, he created the one scenario those safeguards existed for. The door didn't malfunction. The app didn't break. Nothing failed. Everything worked exactly as designed, which is what made it fatal. Because control is not about making a system do what you want. It's about what happens when it doesn't. And in that moment, Derek discovered the most important limitation of smart technology. It only listens. It doesn't think. And when you remove the systems designed to question your decisions, you don't gain control. You remove your last chance to survive them. Case 9. The backyard wizard who cast the wrong spell. Every party needs a moment. That one scene everyone talks about the next day. For most people, that's music, food, maybe a bonfire. For Carl, that wasn't enough. Carl didn't want a moment. He wanted a spectacle. The kind of thing people film, replay, post with captions like, "This guy is insane." Because Carl had recently discovered something dangerous. Internet life hacks. Not the normal kind. Not how to peel garlic faster. The other kind. The kind that involves chemicals, vague instructions, and just enough confidence to make a bad idea look scientific. He had found a video, 45 seconds long. No context, no warnings. Just a man mixing household chemicals and producing a dramatic, self-igniting flame. Bright, colorful, instant. Carl didn't see risk. He saw magic. And more importantly, he saw an audience. So he decided to recreate it. Exactly. Well, not exactly. Because Carl didn't understand chemistry. He understood vibes. Which is not how reactions work. All afternoon, he worked in his shed, mixing liquids, pouring powders, stirring combinations that, in a different context, would require safety gear, ventilation, and a professional who enjoys keeping their eyebrows. Carl had none of those, just a plastic bucket. And confidence. By evening, the party had gathered, friends in the backyard, music playing, drinks flowing. The bonfire stacked high but unlit, waiting. Carl emerged from the shed like a man about to perform a ritual, holding the bucket with both hands, careful, focused, proud. "What are you doing?" someone asked. Carl smiled, because now it was time. "You guys are still using matches?" he said, shaking his head. "That's cute." That sentence sealed his fate, because now it wasn't just about lighting a fire. It was about proving he was smarter than everyone else there. He walked toward the pile of wood. The crowd followed. Phones came out. People leaned in. Because humans love watching someone attempt something they probably shouldn't. "Get ready," Carl said. "This is real magic." He lifted the bucket and began to pour the mixture onto the dry wood. Now, in Carl's mind, this was the moment. The mixture would hit the surface, pause, then ignite in a controlled cinematic burst. A perfect flame, a perfect reaction, a perfect video. What he didn't understand was this. The video he watched had shown ignition. What he created was detonation. Because the specific combination of chemicals he mixed didn't produce a slow burn. It produced a highly unstable, volatile mixture that, under the right conditions, becomes an explosive. And pouring it into a porous pile of dry wood, that was the right condition. There was no delay, no warning, no dramatic buildup. The moment the liquid spread, the reaction triggered. A single deafening boom. Not fire, force. A violent explosion that ripped through the bonfire like it had been designed for destruction. Flames burst outward, wood splintered, shockwave expanding in all directions. And at the exact center of it, Carl. The man who wanted magic. The man who wanted a moment. The man who stood closest to the reaction he did not understand. The fireball consumed the space instantly. Guests were thrown backward. Phones dropped. Screams replaced laughter. Because the spectacle Carl promised had arrived. Just not in a way anyone could control. The bonfire didn't light. It detonated. And Carl, the self-proclaimed wizard, became part of the trick. Because in chemistry, there is no such thing as close enough. There is only correct or catastrophic. And Carl had confidently chosen the second one. He wanted to impress a crowd with something he saw online. Instead, he demonstrated a much more important lesson. If a video skips the safety instructions, it's not a tutorial, it's a warning. Case 10. The man who climbed for the perfect shot and became it. There's a certain type of ambition that only exists behind a camera, the kind that whispers, just a little closer, just one better angle. This shot will be worth it. Marcus lived for that voice. He wasn't a professional filmmaker. He didn't need to be. Because in the age of drones and editing apps, all you really need is vision and a willingness to ignore risk. Marcus had both. His latest project was what he called an industrial decay series. Rusting structures, abandoned sites, moody lighting. Content that made people comment, "Bro, this looks cinematic." And on that day, he had found the perfect subject, a massive electrical pylon. Old, corroded, towering over an empty field like a skeleton that refused to fall. Above it, dark storm clouds rolling in, wind picking up, electricity in the air. To Marcus, this wasn't danger, it was atmosphere. He launched his drone. The machine lifted smoothly into the sky, slicing through the wind, capturing wide, dramatic shots of the structure against the storm. On the screen, it looked incredible, exactly what he wanted. But not enough. Because wide shots don't make legends, close shots do. He needed something better, something unique, a hero angle, the kind of shot that makes people stop scrolling. The kind of shot that makes people say, "How did he even get that?" There was only one way to get it: go up. His friend Liam stood below, watching the clouds, feeling the wind, doing something rare in this video, thinking. "Dude, maybe don't climb that," he said. "Storm's coming in." Marcus laughed, because caution doesn't create content. "Relax," he called back. "It's solid steel." That sentence has never helped anyone. He started climbing, one hand gripping the structure, the other holding the drone controller. Because if you're going to take a risk, You might as well multitask. The metal was rough, flaking, rust peeling under his fingers, but he kept going. Higher. Wind stronger. Rain beginning to mist. Below him, Liam shouted again, but the wind swallowed the warning. And Marcus? Marcus was focused. Eyes locked on the screen, adjusting angles, framing the shot. The drone hovered perfectly. The pylon stretched upward into the storm like a cinematic dream. He had it. Almost. Just needed one more adjustment, one more step, one more position. He planted his foot on a horizontal beam, old steel, weathered, holding, for now. "This is it," he shouted. "Watch this." Of course. Always that line. To prove the structure was stable, to prove he was safe, to prove this was under control, he stomped his foot, hard. There was a moment, a small, quiet pause, the kind that separates confidence from consequence. Then, a sound. Not loud, not explosive, just a sharp, metallic crack. The beam gave way. Rust and time had already done the work. Marcus just delivered the final push. His footing disappeared. Instantly. No warning, no recovery. His body dropped, hands reaching, finding nothing but flaking metal and empty air. The drone kept recording. Stable. Perfect. Unshaken. Because technology doesn't react to panic, it just captures it. Marcus fell. A clean, uninterrupted descent, framed beautifully against the storm he wanted so badly to film. Below, impact. Final. Absolute. And above, the drone hovered. Obedient. Silent. Recording everything. The perfect shot. The exact thing he set out to create. Just not from the angle he expected. Because in the end, Marcus didn't capture the moment. He became it. A final cinematic lesson in something no camera can edit out. You can control the frame. You can control the angle. You can even control what people see. But you cannot control gravity. And gravity always gets the final cut. So now the question is simple. Out of all 10 performances you just witnessed, which one was the absolute dumbest? Not your favorite, not the most entertaining, the one that made you stop and think, how did this person make it this far in life? Was it Leo, who trusted a video game more than a balcony? Trent, who built the perfect room and forgot to include oxygen? Gus, who turned a tire into a bomb to win an argument? Chad, who thought mindset could override hypothermia? Kevin, who aimed for a lake and discovered a tree? Greg, who looked at a warning sign with spikes and licked it? Barry, who challenged a fire hose and lost instantly? Derek, who removed safety features to prove he didn't need them? Carl, who tried to cast a chemical spell and detonated reality? Or Marcus, who climbed for the perfect shot and became it? Go to the comments, pick one, defend it. Because somewhere out there, someone is currently watching this video thinking, I wouldn't do that. And statistically speaking, that's exactly how it starts. Like the video if your IQ feels slightly higher now. Subscribe for more reminders that evolution is a group project, and some people are not pulling their weight.